Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. This meeting will come to order. This is the regular meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee, and I'm Supervisor Malia Cohen, chair of this committee. To my right is the vice chair, Supervisor Scott Wayner, and to my left is Supervisor Peskin. Our clerk is Miss Andrea Osberry, and I'd like to thank the folks from SFGov TV, Leo Diacis and Jesse Larson for helping us and assisting us in broadcasting this meeting. Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of all documents to include as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on April 12, 2016 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Excellent, thank you. Could you please call item number 1?
Yes, item number 1 is an ordinance amending the Public Works Code to incorporate changes to ensure consistency and compliance with California municipal stormwater permit requirements.
Okay, Supervisor Wiener is the author of this item. I believe he's got a few opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Colleagues, this ordinance updates the San Francisco stormwater management requirements for private developments to ensure that our controls are consistent with requirements of California state law. The ordinance also updates and modernizes which kinds of projects trigger compliance with stormwater requirements. San Francisco's stormwater design guidelines and requirements are an innovative solution to ensure that the new developments in the city deal with stormwater on site, and in doing so minimize the contribution of stormwater to our combined sewer system. This in turn minimizes discharge of contaminated water into the bay and the ocean. Sarah Minnick from the SFPUC is here to give a brief presentation.
All right, thank you for that introduction. Thank you, supervisors, for having us here today to talk about the Stormwater Management Ordinance updates. My name is Sarah Minnick, and I work at the SFPUC in the Urban Watershed Management Program. Our team is charged with using policies, regulations, projects, and programs to implement green infrastructure to manage stormwater. So today I'm just going to briefly take you through what the Stormwater Management Ordinance has achieved in its first 6 years and the regulatory drivers that the supervisor spoke of. Originally enacted in 2010, the threshold at that time was 5,000 square feet, and the Stormwater Management Ordinance requires that projects implement green infrastructure to manage stormwater on site. Of course, we have a couple of different conditions in our city that merit different stormwater management goals. So in the separate sewer areas, our concern is to treat stormwater before it reaches receiving water bodies. And in combined system areas, we really want to slow the water down to reduce its impacts to our system. In the first 6 years of implementation, we've had 240 projects come through, and we've had 104 final approvals. And you can see that the ordinance is really having a positive impact on our urban watersheds. You'll see the pictures throughout the presentation are all projects that have been subject to the ordinance. So we're getting a lot of great stormwater benefits, but also urban design and habitat benefits as well, managing a lot of area and removing millions of gallons from our system. Getting some really great projects with rain gardens, permeable paving, and other tools. Today's briefing is really about the amendments that are proposed to come into regulatory compliance with the new permit requirements from the Water Quality Control Board. The board does reissue the permit every 5 years. Staff has to complete an analysis to see what changes we need to make to remain in compliance. We also have had the opportunity to get a lot of feedback from stakeholders, and so we're using this update to also implement our lessons learned as well as come into compliance. The main changes to know about are the change in threshold. So in 2010, small projects below 5,000 square feet were not regulated. In this new amendment, projects between 2,500 and 5,000 square feet will be regulated per the permit. This will only be applied in the separate sewer areas, and we do believe that this will have a low impact overall. The other important change is the change in threshold language. In 2010, the language was based on ground disturbance. Now we are replacing that language with the creation and replacement of impervious surface. This will clarify the requirement, will bring our language into alignment with the regional board's language. Our analysis really shows that this won't make a huge difference, although it will mean that there will be fewer open space projects subject to the stormwater management ordinance. Those are the main changes that we wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you for letting me speak on this, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Supervisor Peskin? No. Okay, in that case, we will go to public comment on item number 1. Is there any public comment on item 1? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Madam Chair, I will move that we forward item 1 to the full Board of Supervisors with a positive recommendation.
And thank you for your leadership on this issue, Supervisor.
Thank you.
All right. Without objection, this motion moves forward with a positive recommendation. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could call items 2 and 3 together, I'd appreciate that.
Yes. Item number 2 is an ordinance amending the building code to permit suspension on construction projects when there are repeated violations of city codes on the project. And item number 3 is an ordinance amending the building, housing, electrical, plumbing, fire, health, planning, and administrative codes to clarify enforcement procedures.
Thank you. Supervisor Wiener is also the sponsor of this legislation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Colleagues, this is pretty broad legislation that frankly is long overdue to reform, restructure, and significantly improve our city's code enforcement process in order to make our buildings safer, to crack down on code violators, to make sure that people are living in habitable, decent housing, to remove neighborhood nuisances, and to create a revolving loan fund to help people correct code violations. Code violations impact neighborhoods and residents all over our city. Every one of us, seen buildings with boarded up windows, broken stairs, major incomplete construction work that's been there for years, obvious extreme hoarding, or even entire portions of buildings that are missing. These extreme and obvious violations can sometimes last for years without correction, without enforcement, and they can lead to serious hazards for occupants and neighbors. We have also all seen situations where construction projects are not violating or not complying with their permits or not complying with our codes. We all want safe buildings. This is important for neighborhoods, for residents, particularly for tenants who are the ones that are forced to live in unsafe and below standard conditions when violations and code enforcement problems aren't being addressed. Too often, code violation inspections occur, but unfortunately, no action or extremely delayed action is taken by city departments, despite repeated complaints by neighbors about dangerous and blighted conditions. And too often, property owners brazenly flout and ignore violations and any efforts to enforce against them. One challenge is that our complicated code inspection system lacks sufficient coordination and communication among the different city departments, which can leave significant gaps in accountability and follow-through. In addition, departments sometimes appear to be reluctant to pursue enforcement, possibly due to budget concerns. For example, over the last 5 years, we have seen referrals to the city attorney vary wildly from year to year or across departments. Between 2010 and 2015, for example, the Department of Building Inspection made 87 referrals for litigation, the Department of Public Health made 56 referrals, the Fire Department made 2 referrals, and the Planning Department made 4 referrals. It's also difficult to track what is going on with buildings and complaints. The system is not working for our neighborhoods or for our residents. Along with Supervisor Cohen, a year and a half ago, I held an oversight hearing in this committee when the building, housing, health, public health, fire, and planning departments all reported on their code enforcement procedures, including recommendations for how to improve the system. After that hearing, which really showed a lot of work that needed to happen, I began to work on legislation, which is now before the committee today. The legislation is broad, impacting our building code, fire code, health code, and planning code, and it will provide better coordination and better and stronger enforcement tools. And I want to thank Jeff Cretan in my office for working on this legislation, and Andres Power as well. First, the legislation creates a unified code enforcement process for DBI, Fire Department, and Department of Public Health, including clear deadlines for issuing notices of violation, for taking further administrative action, and for referring problematic cases to the City Attorney's Office. Currently, different departments have dramatically different timelines and practices, including limitations on whether notices of violation even have to be issued. We need to set firm standards of accountability. This will improve coordination across departments and public confidence in the system. We base the process on the one that is currently employed by the Housing Division in the Department of Building Inspection, which has been a good model for registering complaints and following through on them. Specifically, the process will do the following. When a department official, such as an inspector, determines that a condition renders the building, structure, or property unsafe, they need to serve a notice of violation. They must serve one within 15 days. If the code violation is not corrected within the time required on the notice of violation, or if substantial progress has not been made, then the case shall be referred to an administrative hearing to occur within 60 days of the deadline provided in the notice. At that hearing, the hearing officer shall either determine the violations have been debated or shall issue a written order that specifies the scope of work and the timeline in which the work has to be completed, which shall not exceed 180 days from permit issuance. Notice the use of the word shall. This is no longer discretionary. This is now required that this process move along. Once the order deadline has passed, the case can be referred to the City Attorney's Office if not brought into compliance. There are a few slight differences among the codes to account for different departmental procedures and logistical issues. For example, the fire department has never been required to issue notices of violation and has never been required to hold administrative hearings. Instead, the department has relied on issuing notices of correction, which are not part of the fire code and so lack any enforcement mechanism. And generally, the fire department has not held enforcement hearings. While I acknowledge that this new requirement of requiring notices of violation and hearings will change how the fire department practices enforcement, I believe it's necessary that we create a true process for ensuring abatement of violations. The fire department handles a voluminous amount of violations, some significant and some minor. To account for this, we have created two tiers of violations for the fire department. Priority complaints, which are the life safety issues like sprinklers, egress, and other issues that we all agree must be addressed quickly. These violations are treated by the mandatory process I have just described. We also have created a second category only for the fire department of standard complaints, more minor complaints. For these complaints, the department will have a window of 180 days to allow for correction before an administrative hearing is required to be scheduled. I believe this will give the fire department the flexibility it needs while also making sure that the process moves forward. The legislation, in addition, empowers the city attorney, grants the city attorney the authority to file lawsuits over code violations without requiring departmental action or exhaustion of administrative processes. This will apply to the Department of Building Inspection, Department of Public Health, Fire Department, and Planning Department. Currently, the city attorney can only take action against serial code violators if a department refers a case to the city attorney's office. But as we have seen many, many times, the departments sometimes appear to be hesitant to refer cases to the city attorney's office, or it takes them so long to refer those cases that the violations become stale and the courts throw them out. For example, a report issued by the city attorney's office, as I've described earlier, shows the number of referrals by each department. It varies dramatically by department, and with the planning department and the fire department in particular referring extremely few cases. Additionally, there are times when the city attorney gets a case referred through one department, but then can't also pursue violations written by other departments. For example, if DBI refers a case to the city attorney, it may turn out that there are health code violations or fire code violations that are not being addressed. Under current law, the city attorney cannot include those violations in the lawsuit it files. Under this ordinance, the city attorney's office could fold all violations into one lawsuit and would not be held hostage because one department or another has failed to refer a case for litigation. In this case, each department would be billed separately for the work on their own violations, so the department that made the referral would not be charged for the work attributed to other departments that did not make referrals. This will allow the city attorney to proactively pursue action for significant code violations. The legislation also creates more accountability by establishing a quarterly reporting requirement for all departments. Each report will include every single case that has been referred for an administrative hearing or has an outstanding order from a hearing. Specifically, the departments shall report whether the issue has been resolved, along with any fees and costs paid, whether the matter has been or will be referred to the city attorney for review, or other explanation of how the matter is being handled. This will ensure that cases don't linger and that the public can have full transparency into what is pending at the various departments. The legislation also provides the DBI, Director of the Department of Building Inspection, the clear and explicit authority to suspend all open permits on a project with a history of repeated violations of either the building, public works, or planning codes. Right now, it's unclear if the Director of the Department of Building Inspection has this authority. We believe that the Director does, so that in the case of egregious violations, and we're clarifying this power in this legislation today, the Director will be able to step in and stop the project until all violations are addressed. And then finally, the legislation, and this will actually be in the Budget Committee on Wednesday, creates a code enforcement revolving loan fund to provide low-interest loans to qualified property owners to help them bring buildings up to code. The goal of our code enforcement program is to bring compliance, and this will allow us to help property owners who need assistance to achieve that goal. This legislation has received the unanimous support of the Planning Commission and the Building Inspection Commission. We all want code violations to be abated so that we have safer and more habitable buildings. Colleagues, we do have some very minor amendments in a few sections. We neglected to include the Director of Planning as having the power to take certain steps that other departments have. Specifically, on page 41, line 4, we would like to add the Director of the Planning Department to be listed after the Director of the Department of Public Health. On page 41, that's page 41, line 4. It's just one amendment that we have to make. And so at the conclusion of public comment, I will make that motion. And so, colleagues, we do have a few presentations today, but I see that Chair Cohen may have initial comments.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Weiner, for making this important legislation. I'm incredibly excited. I'd love to be added as a co-sponsor. I think this package, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this package of legislation may sound boring, but it actually has an impact on our everyday lives because what it will do is it will streamline the inspection and enforcement procedures across many different departments so that we will no longer see a lot of that bureaucratic red tape. Currently, each one of these departments, DBI, Fire, Public Works, Health, and Planning, they all have their own unique internal process. But this change would standardize the administrative hearing required for all violations. The other portion of what we're talking about here today, that's important, is that it will reduce the extension time timeline that can be granted from 360 days to 90 days. So that means if you're a property owner and you need an extension, you will no longer have 360 days to comply with the law. You have 90 days to make the corrections. And this change also is very critical because it allows the city attorney to initiate a lawsuit even if the department doesn't refer the case for litigation. As it stands right now, no litigation, it never happened. So we can't go after slumlords if there's no litigation that's ever referred from the department to the city attorney's office. Now we've eliminated that extra step. That's actually a very, very big deal. And so streamlining the lengthy administrative process in which negligent property owners have been taking advantage of and frankly have been abusing. I mean, this is just incredible. Supervisor Wiener, I applaud you. Please add me. I'm enthusiastic and ready to go. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you. I concur with the chairwoman's comments. I was just going to suggest, Supervisor Wiener, subject to public comment, on item number 2 at page 2, line 13, you might want to make that violations plural.
Happy to do that. We'll include that in the post-public comment amendments. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to our city departments. I'll first ask from the Department of Building Inspection, Bill Strawn, to come up.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Bill Strawn, Legislative and Public Affairs at DBI. We've been working with Supervisor Wiener's staff very closely on this, and we're very pleased to have arrived at where we are right now. So we look forward to implementing this.
Thank you very much. Next, from the Department of Public Health, Karen Yu, Senior Environmental Health Inspector.
Thank you. We have reviewed the current draft and we have no further comments.
Thank you very much. We also have Diego Sanchez from Planning, Tom Lackritz from City Attorney, and we also have our Fire Marshal, Dan DeCosio. I want to give them an opportunity if you'd like to say anything.
Thank you, Supervisor. As mentioned, on January 28th, the Planning Commission heard this item. As you mentioned, they approved this unanimously. At that hearing, they also commented that they strongly support the language around increased coordination with city agencies. They believe this ordinance represents a significant step forward in improving enforcement activities citywide, and they were very grateful for your efforts in this, Supervisor Wiener. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the Fire Department, our Fire Marshal is here.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good afternoon. Supervisors, excuse me. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you.
If you could speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. We are in agreement. The Fire Department does support this legislation. However, we would like one portion of it to be slightly amended. We are in agreement that this is all about compliance. And the Fire Department is most successful when we partner with the community and partner with landlords and tenants. And so our request would be to amend the section for other complaints being standard complaints to may and not shall. And the reason for that is we do have, I'll back up a step. We do issue NOVs at this time for all priority complaints, and we do act on those. Right now we do that. For the other complaints that are not imminent hazard or life safety issues, we issue notices of correction. And in doing so, we feel that this, in partnering with the tenants and landlords, we have been successful with this part of this process. Where the NOCs have not been successful, we then transition over to an NOV and then follow down that path. So we would recommend that we not remove the option for standard complaints, the option to give an NOC, where the NOC would be our first step, and then if those issues were not complied with or were abated, then we would transition to the NOV, and then all the other triggers would fall into place, the timing, the hearings, et cetera. So that would be our recommendation. Again, it's about compliance. It's about partnering with the people and residents in San Francisco and the landlords. And in closing, I'd just like to say we do, again, support this legislation with that minor amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have spoken extensively with the fire department about this particular issue, and I've spoken with Chief Hayes White about it, and I understand and respect the fire department's point of view on this, but I do stand by the legislation as drafted. We did include, as I described, a special provision for the fire department that for these lesser complaints, they have 180 days before they have to schedule an administrative hearing to give ample time for correction. But I do think it's important that, that I think whatever department it is, it's important to keep these things on track. So that's my perspective on it, but I do appreciate the fire department's feedback. So those are our departmental statements. And colleagues, if there are no additional comments, I'd like to open this up for public comment, and I will do that. Is there any public comment on items 2 and 3? Let me see if we have any cards here.
No, you don't.
You can just line up. Ms. New.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Janan New, San Francisco Apartment Association. We are here to support this legislation and applaud Supervisor Wiener's efforts in streamlining. I wanted to address a question, Section 102A.6. I just wanted a little clarity in that whoever issues the inspection or the NOV cannot also be the hearing officer. And I think we need to have some clarity around that. Also, we wanted to give you input that in some of these egregious cases that we see, they get forwarded to the city attorney. A lot of times you have a building owner that is incapacitated for one reason or the other, and the city might at some point want to consider a receivership process whereby they can put the property temporarily into the hands of a management company or a third party to get the building fixed up and, obviously deed it back to the person. But a lot of times you have an owner that is either extremely elderly or has a mental illness or whatever. Also, one of the biggest problems we see is that the building department and the fire department don't always communicate well, and we think that that's more of not a relationship issue but a software issue. So we would like to speak in favor of this board doing whatever it can to accelerate the process of the new database at DBI getting upgraded so fire and DBI can communicate easier and you can see those NOVs together in the same location. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And perhaps DBI can answer that question. Ms. Walker. Commissioner Walker.
Yes. Thank you very much, Supervisors. Deborah Walker. I'm the tenant representative on the Building Inspection Commission. I've worked with both the City Attorney's Office and Supervisor Wiener on this very important set of reforms and also the funding to help move it forward and implement it. Code enforcement issues are at the root of most of the emergency situations we have in our city: fires, collapses, displacement. We have many things around the building code, but also planning code of using buildings beyond what the zoning allows. All of those things could be eased a bit if we had more effective code enforcement. So these efforts to coordinate under one umbrella and under one set of rules is really important. I think it's going to go a long way to help us protect our aging building inventory, especially rent-controlled residential buildings. I concur with Janan New about the main part of this is that's going to make it more effective, and the most effective is our permitting system upgrade that we are in the process of. So we will constantly come back to you for support on that. We are having issues that are hopefully being resolved in that, but the success of this program and the reforms will be this data management system that we are currently undergoing. So the issues around fires, the issues around building collapses and displacement and and unenforced zoning all can be remedied and eased with this. So I really want to thank you, Supervisor Weiner, for putting this forward, and ask that that Supervisor Peskin, who knows well what happens when we do not code enforce, and Chair Cohen, really appreciate your support of this set of reforms. So thank you very much. If there's a question, I can easily answer it.
Yeah, so could you or Mr. Strawn respond to Ms. New's question about whether the administrative hearing officer would be the same person as...
Currently, we do not have the same person who issues the notice of violation doing the hearing. It's usually a supervisory. There are delegated people who are who know the broad codes that we enforce. So if a person has written the notice of violation, they are not the ones actually being the hearing officer.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your help with this legislation. Thank you.
But if I may, through the chair to Supervisor Weiner, I think the way building official is defined in Section 102A.3, subsection A, and the way the provisions for a administrative hearing, the conduct of an administrative hearing at 102A.6 are set forth, there isn't anything that precludes that person from being the same person. So maybe just including a sentence that makes it abundantly clear that the inspector and the hearing officer can't be the same person.
I have no problem doing that. So we'll take that as an oral addition to the motion. We'll make it after public comment. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Brooke Turner with the Coalition for Better Housing. I want to thank Supervisor Weiner for this important legislation, very important for life safety of all of our tenants here in San Francisco. And as property owners, we appreciate your effort. We also appreciate the work that the DBI and the fire department did on this and bringing this around. And I want to thank the supervisors who were co-sponsoring and Supervisor Peskin for that amendment. I think that's very helpful. We appreciate it very much, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Joachim Kainz. I'm here to I'm here to support this legislation. I'm here actually on behalf of my children who are 3, 4, and 12, and I'm living actually next to a distressed property. We've moved in 3 years ago, and we became aware that there's a severe hoarding problem next to us. There is a firewood piled up. There is all kinds of debris that is lying around. It actually goes about 60 foot into the hillside. Our neighbor actually can walk out of his upstairs window into his backyard, and he can do the same on the front yard. We've been working for almost 3 years now with various city agencies, including the DBI, the DPH, actually the Parks Department, and the City Attorney's Office, and progress has been extremely slow because there is a lot of bureaucratic process that needs to happen, and I hope really that this legislation will clear some of those things up. We had, for instance, in the DPI, right now there's 4 active cases. It was just referred, thanks to the help of Commissioner Walker and other people, back to the City Attorney's Office, where it actually came out originally. At DPH, the same time, there was miscommunication between the City Attorney and the process there. So they actually ran through the same process 3 times. And while this is going on, essentially, we have to live next to rodents and, a fire hazard and all these kind of things. I think it's overdue that the city does something, and I really appreciate, Supervisor, that you are pushing this legislation forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any additional public comment on items 2 and 3? Seeing none, Madam Chair, may we close public comment?
Yes, we may. Public comment is closed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone who helped with the legislation and everyone who came out today. This is important. It really does. It is a tangible aspect of neighborhood quality of life. And you heard from the last public commenter about a situation on Juiced in the district I represent, where we have just a terrible situation that's impacting, creating all sorts of safety and health problems. And it's just not a lot has happened in terms of enforcement, it shouldn't be that way. We had another situation in my district several years ago where we were actually alerted by the city attorney's office of a extreme hoarding situation on Grandview that was creating a tinderbox situation for the neighborhood, and various departments had been in and out of that home for years, and some had issued notices of violation, some hadn't, but no department was actually taking a lead to do something about it, and we were able to call the departments together to have that coordination, and ultimately the Department of Building Inspection was able to aggressively address it, and Adult Protective Services got the resident into alternative housing, and the situation was remedied. But it shouldn't take the involvement of an elected official just to get departments to talk to each other. And so the hope is that this legislation will allow us to have much more efficient and effective code enforcement, so that we don't have a situation where the front part of a building is completely removed and 4 or 5 years go by and no one does anything about it, and it leaves neighbors to wonder what the heck is going on here. Not to mention the all too common situation where a building with tenants is in dilapidated, horrible, inhumane conditions, and again, you wonder what is going on here and why aren't we doing anything more proactively about it. So colleagues, I do believe this legislation will move us in a very positive direction to improve our code enforcement system here in San Francisco. So I would first move that we adopt the amendment that I described at the beginning, in addition to the typographical correction that Supervisor Peskin mentioned, and the oral amendment that Supervisor Peskin suggested regarding the hearing officer not being the same person as the inspector who issues the notice of violation. So I make that motion.
And if I may, before
Yes.
We proceed, just to be clear, on item 2, page 2 at line 13, at the end of violation, I think it would be parenthesis S, close parenthesis, and then on relative to my verbal amendment to 102A, I'm not sure if it belongs in point 3 or point 6. I think maybe it belongs in point 6. Perhaps at the end of sub A, and I'm looking at Deputy City Attorney Givner, provided that the building official cannot serve as the hearing officer.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, the building official is the term referred to throughout the code. I believe it refers to the head of the department. So, although I don't have that code section in front of me, how about the hearing officer, just what Ms. New suggested, the hearing officer shall not be the same individual who signed the NOV or as the individual who signed the NOV, something like that?
That works.
Okay, that works. All right.
So that's my motion.
All right, so a motion has been made, and without objection, this motion passes unanimously. We accept the amendments, by the way. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Madam Chair, I now move that we forward items 2 and 3 as amended to the full Board of Supervisors with positive recommendation.
Okay. Without objection, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call item 4?
Item number 4 is a resolution establishing the Filipino Cultural Heritage District.
Excellent. Thank you. Supervisor Kim is the author of this wonderful piece of legislation. I'm sure she's got a few opening remarks.
I do, Chair Cohen.
Welcome.
And first of all, I want to thank members of the community for being here today, but also for your years of effort to begin to get us to the point where we are initiating this process today. As many of you know, Filipinos are the largest Asian American group in the state of California, and in 2011, according to the 2011 census. In the state of California, there are already 2 other geographic areas of importance to the Filipino community, which is historic Filipino town in Los Angeles and Little Manila in Stockton, both fought for vigorously by our communities. And both areas highlight the presence and the history of our Filipino-American community and their contributions to these areas. It is important that we here have such a location in the Bay Area. 9% of all Filipino-American immigrants to the U.S. reside in the San Francisco metropolitan area, and an additional 3% reside in the San Jose metropolitan area. South of Market is the home of many of our Filipino and Filipino-American cultural assets. These spaces and these organizations provide a context to the community's more than 100-year history in San Francisco. And the district that we are working to establish here today not only respects, recognizes, and preserves the history of this community and all of their contributions to the neighborhood and the city and county of San Francisco as a whole, but also highlights the need to stabilize existing residents and small businesses in the face of the ongoing development that we see occurring here in San Francisco and the incredibly fast-changing environment in all of our neighborhoods. In fact, since 2002, according to the census, the city has lost 10% of our Filipino population to other outlying areas. South of Market is the home to many of our institutions that we are so proud of here in the community. It is home of Bessie Carmichael, the first and only elementary school to teach Filipino as part of its curriculum. Victoria Manalo Draves Park, our first park named after a Filipino-American Victoria, who is the first Filipina gold medalist representing the United States and grew up swimming right here in the recreational centers of San Francisco. The Filipino-American Development Corporation, Bayanihan, West Bay, Veterans Equity Center, Bindle Stiff, Cool Arts, and of course, our Pistahan Parade, Pearl Festival, and Barrio Fiesta, and really countless others. But beyond all the cultural institution, Filipino Americans have been leaders in the city, in fact, have shaped what we see today in the city that we live in, either through fighting for jobs, equalities, affordable housing, and many of the things that we are so proud to say that we have preserved here in San Francisco. And the Filipino American community continues to contribute in great length to continue to advocate for our seniors, for our families, for our youth and family special use district, of which we don't have anywhere else here in the city, and of course, most importantly, have been often at the forefront, leading the fight to build more affordable housing and to preserve existing rent control housing here. On April 9th, we embark on the anniversary of the Day of Valor and recognize the heroism of more than 76,000 Filipinos, Chinese, and American soldiers that surrendered to the Japanese at dawn on April 9th, 1942. This surrender, commonly referred to as the Bataan Death March, hastened the fall of Corregidor, and Bataan forced them to slow down, giving the Allies valuable time to prepare for conflicts such as the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway. American and Filipino liberation forces eventually retook the Bataan Peninsula on February 8, 1945. We can't help but draw a similar analogy to the courageous involvement of the broad spectrum of the Filipino community that is here today to support the formation of Soma Filipinas. I am proud to support this community-driven plan born out of the Western Soma planning process that began in 2007. And to hasten the impact of the development of the Filipino immigrant community. This plan is not just important for our Filipino and Filipino-American community, but San Francisco as a whole as we work to preserve the cultural and character of our diverse communities. So we do have a number of members of the public that are here to speak today. But just quickly, I do want to thank and recognize the countless community organizations that have supported the formation of Soma Filipinos: the Filipino American Development Foundation, Veterans Equity Center, Filipino Women's Network, Filipino American Arts Exposition, the South of Market Community Action Network, West Bay Filipino, Filipino Community Center, Bindle Stiff Studios, the first Filipino performance venue in the country, and Cool Arts. And I also want to recognize Dr. Dawn Mabalon, who actually I've known since I was an undergrad, who is the associate professor at San Francisco State University's History Department, for working with us to review the resolution and also make sure that we got our history all correct. I have a lot more to say, but a lot of it is in the resolution that is before you today, and I also want to give members of our public an opportunity to speak about why this is so important here in the South of Market, and of course my colleagues on the committee if they want to make any opening remarks.
Thank you. Are there any remarks, colleagues? Supervisor Kim, I do want to say congratulations. I know this has been a heavy lift and years in the making, and to the members of the community that are here this afternoon, thank you. Congratulations. I think this is a true testament of what heart and dedication, what it yields. I'm happy to be a co-sponsor. Supervisor Kim, if I'm not already one, please add my name. And with that, we'll open up to public comment at this time. Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Helen Marta Bautista, and I represent the International Hotel Senior Housing Corporation and the Filipino Women's Network. I would like to congratulate Supervisor Jane Kemp for doing this enormous push for accepting and honoring the Filipinos in your section of town. I want to remind you that Filipinos Education Center started in the 60s because all these Filipino immigrated here, and the children came when they were just 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and there was no place to teach them Tagalog because there were Tagalog speakers. The city, this district decided to put a Filipino education center, and part of that center was Bessie Carmichael. And they started to hire Filipino teachers because the children did not understand English. So I was involved at Bessie Carmichael, and I was teaching 4th grade and 6th grade at that particular time. But I also want to remind us that because of the convention center, a lot of these homes were taken out, and most of the Filipino families had to move out. And that started a whole degradation of families in that center. But anyway, I'm delighted that we're building this center again. Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually failed to read the speaker cards, but I see most of you in line. But just for the sake, since many of you did fill it out, but please feel free to speak at any point. We have Bernadette Borjas C., who's been incredibly involved in making this happen. Juvie Barbonio, Cecile Escalon, Charm, Consolacion, Deanne Ruiz, Jason Ildefonso, Desi Denganan, Angelica Cabande, and Raymond Castillo.
First of all, thank you, supervisors. Hi, Jane. I have Supervisor Jane Kim and all the other supervisors who have given their leadership and support for this legislation. I'm here speaking on behalf and support for this legislation as a resident of San Francisco since 2000. I'm also a member of the business community of San Francisco. Some of my ventures in the past have been the Summit, which was the first co-working incubator in the Mission District. I also helped bring Filipino food into the mainstream with Polang Lounge, which was over by USF. And currently, I have a new venture called Plinth, where we help startups grow through branding and crowdfunding. But before I came to San Francisco, one of the things that happened when I was growing up in LA is that I always noticed that there was a lack of visibility of our community. There are Chinatowns, there are Japantowns, but no Manila towns. As I grew into my political consciousness, one of the things that I learned was that the Bay Area Filipinos were in the forefront of fighting for our rights, and now we're at this point right now where we're finally going to have our recognition. So right now I'm here to speak to you as a business leader in our community to let you know that when we do build Soma Pilipinas, that we're going to be tapping into the values that make San Francisco great, which is inclusion, collaboration, and innovation. Inclusion in the sense that when we lack the skills or the resources in our community to build this new world, that we're going to be reaching across the aisle to non-Pinoys and our allies to build this. In terms of innovation, one of the things that we want to do is that Soma Pilipinas, the core of it, is in one of the most blighted neighborhoods in San Francisco. So what we want to do is build a new renaissance of Philippine entrepreneurship to build a new community and to also develop economic development in that area. And some of the innovative ways that we're looking to do this is we're looking to build leaders, bring in leaders from our community to, one, incubate, and two, train our future business leaders, and two, we're also looking...
Thank you, Desi.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Bernadette Borja C. I'm honored to be here representing the Filipino American Development Foundation, its partner organizations, and so many community members who've worked so long and hard to get here to establish Soma Pilipinas, the Filipino Cultural Heritage District of San Francisco. FADF began the work to establish Soma Pilipinas in 2000 to bring to the forefront the vibrant Filipino community living in South of Market. FADF's MC Canlas began identifying and showcasing these Filipino assets, historical buildings, legacy arts organizations, neighborhood-serving businesses, cultural celebrations, including Pistahan, the Parol Festival, and Barrio Fiesta. And we are proud to have this long and rich history among San Francisco's diverse communities. And we look forward to continue being an integral part of the growth in San Francisco's Soma neighborhood. It is time that our communities are recognized and that our presence be known. This is the first step in making sure that we do all we can to protect this rich cultural heritage of Filipinos in Soma. We thank you all for your leadership in recognizing the importance of the Filipino community in San Francisco with your support in the establishment of this district. And I thank everyone in the community who's working to preserve and share Filipino culture, and for everyone helping to keep Filipinos in Soma and San Francisco. We all celebrate our Soma Pilipinas together. Mabuhay Soma Pilipinas.
Thank you, Ms. C.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Mayarly Mondahar. I'm one of the commissioners of the Commission on Community Investment and Infrastructure and a board member of the Filipino Women's Network. I am appearing before you as a long-term resident of District 6. I've been living in District 6 for more than 20 years, and to thank you for the resolution and hopefully the unanimous approval establishing Soma Pilipinas, the Filipino Cultural Heritage District in San Francisco. This is finally our own Filipino town, and it's a formal acknowledgement of the many contributions of the Filipino community to the rich diversity of San Francisco. You may know that San Francisco has certified Tagalog as its third official language in 2014. But this resolution is an important step as it establishes the strategic and implementation plan to develop Soma Pilipinas as a regional center for Filipino culture and commerce. This resolution will help stem the outmigration of Filipinos in San Francisco. As you may know, the Census 2000 indicates that there were over 40,000 Filipinos in San Francisco, and our population has decreased to 36,347, with about more than 5,000 Filipinos in District 6 clustered in the Soma Pilipinas area. We lost about almost 10% in 10 years and still losing Filipinos leaving San Francisco. This resolution is a major step in stabilizing Filipino residents. And thank you, because the businesses also have to be nurtured and established. And I hope that we can put together a vibrant and exciting Soma Pilipinas in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mondahar, for your support and leadership.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Juvie Barbonio, and I live and work in the South of Market. I'm very happy to be here to express my support for the city to establish the Filipino Cultural Heritage District resolution. Soma Pilipinas, and hope you will join me in this historic time with your support in passing the resolution that will recognize my neighborhood as Soma Pilipinas. Soma to me is a community full of people. Like me, it's like a home, a new home away from home. Soma is the alleyways like where I live. Soma to me is the family parties and get-togethers full of food, laughter, and singing. Soma to me has organizations that I trust to help when I need it most. Soma celebrates Filipino culture with paroles and performances. We have school lessons that teaches students Filipino languages and culture. We have festivals that welcome all of the Bay Areas to celebrate with us. I know people may not see or experience the way I see it. To them, it's not a neighborhood. It's the streets you need to get through to get to or from the highway. It's an opportunity to build high-rises close to downtown. It's big lots primed for big developments. It's the address ventures capitalists look for when dishing out money to startups. In the city's fights against growing inequality, Soma is the front line. We appreciate the leadership of Supervisor Jane Kim, and we will be looking forward to all your continued leadership in making sure we keep Filipinos in the Soma, and that Soma Pilipinas doesn't become just a way to remember what it used to be. Passing Soma Pilipinas is an opportunity to make sure that our organizations, our businesses, and our residents can continue to be rooted in the city. It's an opportunity to make sure everyone can see Soma how I see it. A neighborhood of beautiful culture, a rich heritage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Cecil Gregorio Ascalon, and I am the Executive Director of PSRC, Filipino Senior Resource Center. I am here on behalf of the Filipino and Filipino-American seniors, and we are supporting Soma Pilipinas. Our seniors play an important role in the history and culture of Soma. Filipino culture is one of the reasons why we are proud to say that we are Filipinos. We have something that other nations do not have, and that is our culture. I believe that Soma Pilipinas will create an environment where our seniors can raise and enhance their sense of dignity and self-worth, inspiring and enabling them to be independent and be more involved in community activities. Thank you very much, Supervisor Jane Kim.
Thank you, Ms. Escalon.
Hello, good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Charm Consolacion. I'm with the Galing Bata After School program, and I wanted to share Galing Bata has been with the Bessie Carmichael at Filipino Education Center in the South Market for over 14 years now, and we provide quality guidance, care, and protection for kindergarteners through 8th grade. Through culture and language, and our program highlights a healthy development of the students' identity, instilling pride in both the Filipino and American cultures. And working there for over 7 years, I've witnessed families working hard for their children and appreciating a safe space and also a community that they can lean on to nurture the language and culture of their children. I believe that this cultural heritage district, Soma Pilipinas, will strengthen our Filipino community, instill pride, and acknowledge that we've been here for many generations helping build the city and would like to see our children to grow up and continue to live in the city. So thank you very much for supporting and sponsoring this legislation. We hope to continue working with you and strengthening our Filipino community.
Thank you, Charm.
Hi, I'm Diane Ruiz from the South of Market Community Action Network. I really look forward to Soma Pilipinas being a turning point for the way that the city addresses land use issues when it comes to Filipinos. It really is a lot of land use issues that brought Filipinos to this place of displacement in the city, from redevelopment in the Fillmore and Yerba Buena, from the expansion of the financial district to destroy the 10 blocks of what was Manila Town adjacent to Chinatown. All of these policies have brought the Filipino community to the low level that it is. Soma, despite displacement, is still the cultural touchstone for Filipinos in the Bay Area and for much of the U.S.
And Soma Pilipinas as a land use policy is going to be really important in reinforcing the community within San Francisco. Also look forward to working with the city in future land use policies and future and ongoing land use policies such as the Central Soma Plan as we embark on this important new policy for the area. Really look forward to having the proper resources be allocated to Soma Pilipinas and attention so that Central Soma can be implemented with Soma Pilipinas as an important part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Desiree Smith, and I'm Deputy Director of San Francisco Heritage. I'm here to express our support for the adoption of Soma Pilipinas, the Filipino Cultural Heritage District. This legislation is an important first step in the goal to further develop Soma Pilipinas as a regional center of Filipino culture, recognize the historical and present contributions of the community, and to stabilize Filipino residents, business, and community-serving institutions. Passage of this legislation will set in motion the creation of a strategic and implementation plan to establish policies that promote community development and stabilization and increase the presence and visibility of the district. Such a strategy could include provisions for nominating businesses or nonprofits to San Francisco's Legacy Business Registry, nominating historic sites to the city's landmark program, developing and overseeing placemaking projects, or establishing a community land trust to purchase new properties or important properties and ensure future community uses. Those are just a few examples. Building on the significant work that has already been done to date by the community, along with the planning department and other allies, a comprehensive strategy and implementation plan is necessary to translate these ideas into action and to establish a vision and leadership structure for the district moving forward. In 2014, Heritage issued a policy paper entitled Sustaining San Francisco's Living History. Many of the strategies profiled in the report were generated during a community summit of the same name that was held in Soma at the Bayanihan Community Center in 2013. In the report, we identify the adoption of Soma Pilipinas Cultural District as a priority, and we hope our research can inform the planning process for the district. Congratulations to everyone who has had a hand in making this legislation happen, and we are committed to supporting this important initiative through implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Steve Arivolo, and I'm a resident at 106 South Park. For those of you who don't know about 106 South Park, this building was purchased in 1920 by the Gran Oriente Filipino Rizal Lodge. We have owned this property. Unfortunately, we're in the process of selling it. One of our goals is to preserve this property of the legacy of the Gran Oriente in California. We also have a temple on Jack London, which we have extensive archives going back almost 100 years. I invite the supervisors to come and see our archives. It's beautiful, beautiful pictures. This hotel was purchased by Filipino men who just came from the Philippines. Were farm workers, were seamen, were domestic helpers, and they worked to buy this 24-unit hotel. I could remember back in the 70s when I was a community organizer in the South of Market, going down the alleyways of Natoma, Mina, and Rush Street, smelling the beautiful Filipino foods in the alleys, people cooking, kids playing in the alleyways. It was just such a beautiful thing back then. Today, with gentrification, many of our families have moved out. As you know, the South of Market has been a focal point of newly arrived immigrants, where they stay, they save money, they work, and then they move. They move to Daly City, they move to Union City, they move to Vallejo, they move to San Jose. So we need to preserve this area, and for the future, and I want to commend Supervisor Kim and April Ang for their hard work and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Revolo, and thank you also for your work to preserve the Grand Oriental Hotel in South Park.
Hi, my name is Caroline Calderon, and I work with the Veterans Equity Center, but I'm also a teacher at the University of San Francisco through an organization called Pinoy Pinay Educational Partnerships. Part of my role as an outreach coordinator for VEC and an educator with PEP is to connect students with the Filipino community, especially in the South of Market. I myself started out as a student at USF, and I volunteered as a tutor for students at Bessie Carmichael Elementary. It is through my experiences as a student that I learned about the history of Filipino World War II veterans and also studied how imperialism, forced migration, and gentrification have impacted the Filipino community worldwide, especially here in San Francisco. The Filipino Cultural Heritage District is so essential for myself, my students, and the seniors and families that I serve because it acknowledges the history of displacement of Filipinos in other communities, whether it be Manila Town, to the Fillmore Western Addition, to Yerba Buena, to the South of Market. It also acknowledges the history of resilience of Filipino immigrants, workers, and longtime residents of San Francisco. Despite this history of displacement, in the Filipino community, students from all over the country, and I would even argue worldwide, continue to come to the South of Market to learn about its history, its people, murals, and places of significance, such as the Bayanihan Community Center, which is home not only to the Veterans Equity Center, but the Archipelago Bookstore, which is the only Filipino-American bookstore in the country. We have a lot of onlys and firsts here in San Francisco. And so students from USF, San Francisco State, City College, and other Bay Area universities come to our organizations to learn about what is being done to preserve the history of the neighborhood. And so I ask that you continue your support for the establishment of Soma Pilipinas. I believe that your support not only acknowledges this history of displacement and resilience, but I also believe that it's a symbol of solidarity.
Thank you, Ms. Calderon, and thank you for bringing up our beloved bookstore.
Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, Supervisors Kim, Wiener, Cohen, and Wiener.
Peskin.
And Peskin, excuse me. My name is Carlos Yalcita. I'm the founder and director of the San Francisco Filipino-American Jazz Festival, founded in 2008 to promote, preserve, and celebrate contributions by Filipino and Filipino-American artists to jazz, blues, and world music. From the very beginning, our presentations, which includes concerts, educational forums, and seminars, have been in a cultural and historical context. Historical in that we spoke about jazz in New Orleans, and that the Filipino presence in 1700 there, certainly we were present for that formation and creation of that art form. Also, jazz in the Philippines when it was brought there, again, around 1900 by the African-American Buffalo Soldiers. The Filipinos, in turn, became the ambassadors of jazz throughout Asia. And here in San Francisco, where our presence from the very beginning included music, an integral part of our culture, we have celebrated jazz here in San Francisco in the Chinatown, Manilatown area, in the Fillmore Jazz District back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when it really was a jazz district, and also the Tenderloin, one of the very first areas we were allowed to live. Please remember, we were not allowed to cross Market Street until after World War II, so many of our earlier residents lived above Market Street. In the beginning, in 2008, we were already in the Soma neighborhood. Our first concert was at the Metreon Theater and also the Yerba Buena Gardens and Center for the Arts. Our third through sixth years were in the Fillmore at Yoshi San Francisco. And our seventh and eighth year was at the International Hotel Manilatown Center. We would like very much to continue our work and our mission statement, again, in an accurate
Thank you, Carlos. And I should just call the rest of the cards, Emile de Guzman, Teresa Imperial, and Commissioner Al Perez. But feel free to speak. Mr. Kelly?
Sure. Supervisors, thank you for sponsoring and co-sponsoring this measure today. I'm Tony Kelly. I'm Vice President of the Potrero Boosters Neighborhood Association, where we stood with the SOMCAN and South of Market neighbors during the long, weary fighting years of the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan and the creation of the Youth and Family Zone in South of Market, and also worked closely with Bindlestiff Studio when they rebuilt their theater in 2011, 2012. And I think that story in particular about Bindlestiff is maybe useful to recall for just a moment here in support of this measure. Folks, in the late 80s, early 90s, I lived on Clara Street and then Russ Street in South of Market and went to Bindlestiff when it was founded by white hipster refugees from Dude Theater in the 80s. And they discovered their neighbors and brought them into workshops there, and Teatro Ning Tanan, in particular a strong Filipino community arts group, ended up taking over the theater from the Dudes and turning it into the Bindlestiff institution that you know today. And the fact that Bindlestiff outlived the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency, I think is actually a testament to their small but mighty resilience, their stubbornness, and their motto, which is never give up. And it's really a pleasure to see today the proposed creation of a heritage district to recognize what Carlos has been doing with the Jazz Festival for many years, what Bindlestiff has been doing for many years in the theater community, and creating professional theater performers out of a community arts group. There's a very strong heritage already in the South of Market for the Filipino community. It's a history of displacement and defense and great growth and great creativity. They don't need a heritage district to acknowledge that. It's there, but it's great to have a heritage district so that the city can recognize their commitment and try to match that commitment in the years to come. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. You reminded me the first time I ever publicly performed bass guitar was at Bindlestiff Studio for Pinoy's Pop.
Hello, supervisors, and actually I saw that picture on Facebook. But, my name is Jason, native to San Francisco, born and raised in 24th and Mission Street. I live in the Excelsior now. I'm one of the co-founders of the Filipino Community Center, but the majority or almost all of my working young life and adult life has actually been here in Soma. I worked in print companies like Blueprint Service. I worked with architectural firms over here. I lived at the Trinity Plaza. And then when it was time to start like having a family, all our kids actually went to Bessie Carmichael. And the great thing about Bessie was it was K-8. And you could make sure your kids are safe. And you know that their friends are from kindergarten are going to be their friends until high school. I think one of the beautiful things about Soma is, like the people that spoke, people keep coming back. And it helps them get to places where they want to be in their lives. I think one of the challenging things that we can also try to look at is when they graduate to high school, they're dispersed. It's kind of like my daughter right now, she's going to graduate at Balboa High School. And I think that the great thing is if they go to K-8, it would be good to be together. I work at SOMCAN right now. I'm in charge of the workforce development, and I think one of the great things about the employment and workforce program we're starting over there is to give everybody in that neighborhood, to design it so it really can cater to them, and they're not going outside of Soma, and we're working with different partners in South of Market. And in the end, I think we would love to be respected just like every other place in San Francisco. Like we have Chinatown, Little Italy, and it would be great to really have the Soma here in South of Market. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for also being the sound guy at all of our events.
Hello, magandang hapon po, supervisors. Good afternoon. My name is Vivian Zalvadea Aurelio. I'm the Executive Director of West Bay Filipino Multi-Service Center. We represent under-resourced Filipino immigrant youth, families, and seniors. It's my pleasure to support this resolution creating a Filipino Cultural Heritage District in San Francisco. This brings San Francisco at par with other major cities that have similar districts in place, for example, historic Filipino town in Los Angeles and Little Manila in Vancouver. In fact, this move is truly long overdue, not only because we are currently the biggest Asian American population in California. Filipinos continue to have a high rate of immigration into the United States. This community, supervisors, will only continue to grow in numbers. We hope that San Francisco will honor this through the creation of an active and living cultural heritage district, which would mean, number one, protecting the original Filipino residents that still reside in Soma from higher costs of living and eviction, perhaps through the creation of a set of gentrification protection policies, creating incentives to attract Filipino businesses into the area, in much the same way incentives were provided to other sectors such as tech to grow businesses in the area. And number 3, providing funding that would visually highlight the area as a Filipino heritage district, for example, through artwork and Tagalog language signage. So maraming salamat po, supervisors. Mabuhay po ang Pilipino, and salamat po, Supervisor Kim, for your leadership on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for representing West Bay Filipino Center.
Hi, my name is Teresa Imperial. I'm here as a board of Manila Town Heritage Foundation, and also I'm a case manager for Bill Sora Housing Program Veterans Equity Center. As a board of Manila Town Heritage Foundation, we continue to retell the story of the iHotel struggle and the eviction. We continue to have iHotel tour for the students to know about the history of the iHotel and also the history of Manila Town. iHotel, as you guys know, is sparked the tenants' right movement here in San Francisco and also a focal point for Asian American movement. As a staff, a case manager for Veterans Equity Center, my grandfather was also a World War II veteran, and so seeing World War II veterans here in San Francisco and struggling to get for their equity and also struggling to live here in San Francisco, I've seen the struggles. It's most cases, it's very inhabitable places that we're living in. And that's why we decided to establish or create the Bill Sora Housing Program so that we could protect and give education to the Filipinos, veterans and also their families, and now to citywide as well. So we hope that the Soma Pilipinas, it is a bittersweet kind of recognition because we've always struggled through iHotel, the Yerba Buena redevelopment, and other development fights. But we're still here and fighting, and we're still here willing to stay here in San Francisco. So this is a good recognition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Imperial.
I have some handouts I would like to present.
Sure.
So,
Commissioner, thank you so much for being here.
thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Supervisors Kim, Paskin, Wiener, and Cohen for hearing us today. My name is Al Perez. I'm a 35-year resident of San Francisco. I'm a commissioner in the San Francisco Entertainment Commission, but I'm here in my capacity as community organizer, as president of the Filipino American Arts Exposition. I would like to thank everyone in the community who are involved in this Herculean effort for working together to declare the Soma as a community Filipino Cultural Heritage District. So I took the liberty of creating an updated area map that's being distributed to you now as a visual guide to show you the concentration of Filipino landmarks, community assets, nonprofit organizations, and businesses in the South of Market. I fully support this resolution because Soma is the home of the Filipino community. The organization that I lead produces several cultural events that take place in the South of Market, including the 23rd Annual Pistahan Parade and Festival at the Yerba Buena Gardens, the 4th Annual New Filipino Cinema at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, the Culinary Showcase at the Metreon, and twice each baseball season we also organize the Giants Filipino Heritage Night at AT&T Park. FAAE used to have our office at the Mint Mall on Mission and 5th Street. But FAAE had to move our office over 3 times in the area over the last 8 years in search of affordable rent. As a grassroots, all-volunteer nonprofit organization, we just could not afford the increasing rental costs in the Soma. Now I'm working out of my home office with all of our festival materials in public storage. Many other Filipino nonprofits, business owners, and residents are being driven out of Soma due to skyrocketing rent. I believe that the official recognition of the Soma Pilipinas will bring lots of energy, excitement, and community pride to the neighborhood and will bring the attention and necessary resources that the Filipino community in the South of Market desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perez. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this map. Beautiful.
Great job, Al. My name is Emil de Guzman, and I have worked in the South of Market for many years. I'm also a member of the Gran Oriente Filipino. I want to give another angle or take on this resolution. I certainly support it. As someone who was evicted nearly 40 years ago at the International Hotel on Kearney Street, that was sort of the death knell for that community. That is, after the eviction of the Filipino and Chinese elderly, there no longer was a Manila town. And so for years, we've come up to another era, and that era, kind of like now, socialism is more acceptable, right?
Is it?
Well, I think so. I mean, I read the papers, don't you? But what I'm saying is that we have a new generation of young people. We have a number of community-based groups. We have a number of, active people in the South of Market. And I think that my take on it is that it's not about now, it's about the next 5 to 10 years where there's going to be greater gentrification, there's going to be greater cranes, there's going to be more high-end housing, there's going to be homelessness in this city concentrated in the South of Market. We have to do something about looking ahead. For the Board of Supervisors to take responsibility for that as well as for the Filipino community, because we're also fighting for our life. The displacement that goes on will continue as land use values go up for the land here, and we have to be able to protect our community, the working families that exist in the homeless population. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. de Guzman. And I'm just going to call the rest of the cards that I do have. Ada Chan, Tony Robles, and Romerico Remedio.
Good afternoon, Supervisor. My name is Raymond Castillo, and I'm with South of Market Community Action Network. I do have a piece to share to you guys, but unfortunately, some of my youth couldn't be here because it's school time. But so they did prepare a video. So if you guys don't mind, I want to show the video before I share my piece, if that's okay. Where's the sound? How do you do the sound on this?
Do you mind if we have someone speak while you're setting that up? Yeah, I know. We're helping. Okay. But maybe we can have Rico come and speak while you're fixing that.
Good afternoon, District Supervisors. My name is Rico Remedio. I'm a long-term resident here in Soma. We've been here since 1973, coming from the Philippines. And I just want to bring everybody back, from how I started. I was 11 years old, and I was really scared coming from the third world country to United States. And we ended up in South of Market. We lived on 152A Rush Street. And I didn't want to come out because I'm scared. I didn't want to go to school because I can't speak English. But when I finally came out, I seen a lot of Filipino live in the neighborhood. And my classmates were Filipinos and also my teachers. So, I felt good, I didn't feel like I'm somewhere else to where I'm too far from the Philippines. I felt like I'm in the Philippines, but in a different city. And, I wish my mom could speak English so she can tell you guys how important it is for her about the Soma Filipino. And I hope my dad's still alive, and so he can also tell you guys how much he appreciates living here in South of Market. And I remember growing up, I seen a lot of Filipino family work hard. We're the working class people here in South of Market, and I'm all over the city, and I see about 90% of Filipino live in South of Market. I'm just thankful for FYCC. Steve Arevalo was my mentor when I was growing up, Anita Sanchez, and they made it easier for me to make an adjustment and to do the right thing. I remember when former mayor George Moscone, may he rest in peace, became a mayor here in San Francisco, and there was a rumor that he's going to make Soma a Filipino town. But sadly, he was murdered, and that plan died with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Remedio. Yeah? Let's try to.
Sound is not working, so.
It should be working now? Yeah. Try it again.
Important thing to do here in the Soma. Regional capital. I'm from the Excelsior district, but I did live in Soma for about 3 years. I'm part of Johanna, which is a part of SOMCAN.
Hi, my name is Eric. I'm from SF. I live in the Mission District, born and raised.
Philippines is a very important thing to do here in the Soma, just because there's so many families that live in this area. I went to school at Bessie Carmichael, which is in the Soma, and believe me, there's so many Filipinos, like almost everybody there is a Filipino.
It's important to culturally preserve our history. It's important for us to continue our tradition and where we live.
The Soma district should have an emphasis and should be made into a cultural district for Filipinos, as a lot of the districts known here in SF are mainly known for the demographic of races that they have. Like the Mission district will be known for the Latino population, and the Soma district will be known for the Filipino population.
I think it's very important to have something like an iconic figure really distinguish our culture.
It makes sense for the Filipino culture to have like their own community in the Soma, because Soma is highly concentrated with Filipinos compared to other neighborhoods.
So I do think there should be an emphasis. People should know what's actually happening in the city, because it's crazy how the people that live in that district are the same people that are being displaced, So there should be a place where, they can call themselves their own, and the city would support it,
I think it'd be very essential. It'd be great just because, there's these places like Chinatown and Japantown, and if we bought like a Soma Philippines, then, we could be a part of that whole norm. And then everybody will get to know like what we are here, other than just news about Filipinos getting evicted. So.
Thank you, supervisors. Is it okay if I share my piece before time runs out, or can I? No?
Yeah, we can give you 1 minute.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. Welcome to the Saddle Market SFC, where community and family is where we be. You can find me in Howard, right there by 7, chilling with the people of the Soma resident. Walk with me to the VMD. Park and Rec with Tim is the place to be. We got children at Bessie, Galing Bata program, Tagalog class, feeling closer to our homeland. Oh man, I could do this all day. After school, we could go, straight to West Bay, while struggle is evident. Living in a tenement, never hesitate to fight a serious experiment. So-called development. We got people out here ready and down to represent, while others see it differently. Let it be known, this is Soma we'll fight for. This is our home. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.
Next speaker, Tony.
Beat that, Tony.
Hi, I can't do any better than that. My name is Tony Robles. I'm board president of the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. What would San Francisco be without the Filipino community? It would be pretty damn dull, right? Yeah. Does everybody agree? Filipino community has contributed profoundly to our city in housing justice, in the arts, in civic government, in education. What we're talking about is community equity. And to echo what Emil de Guzman said earlier, we need to plan for the next couple of generations. We have to plan ahead. I support the recognition and establishment of Soma Pilipinas, but I want to say that it goes beyond mere ornamentation, that our culture is not just mere ornamentation. Our culture is a treasure. It's a treasure in Soma. It's a treasure in the the work that we do, the values that we represent as a Filipino community, as a Soma Filipino community, collective community, looking out for each other, concern for our elders, working with our elders, intergenerational work and advocacy, true agency of our community so that our children can grow. We saw that video, and that's our future. The establishment of this community will send a proper message, because oftentimes, our community feels like it's overlooked, and taken for granted. And, we've contributed profoundly and deeply to San Francisco in every field and on every level. And I just want to make that clear as being a part and speaking for Manilatown Heritage Foundation. Long live the iHotel and long live Soma Filipinas.
Thank you, Mr. Robles.
Hello, my name is Ada Chan. I'm the project manager for Soma Filipinas. I want to thank you so much for your sponsorship of this legislation, Supervisor Wiener, Cohen, and Peskin, as well as, of course, the leadership of Supervisor Kim. Thank you very much. There are many people here who are not getting up to speak. The young women from the Veterans Equity Center are all here to hear and watch your leadership and support you in doing this with us. MC Canlas, who is the founder, kind of the brainchild of this project, is also here. And he wanted me to point out that the Asia Society in New York had printed out Asia in San Francisco Bay Area as a tour book. And they talk about the Filipino community in San Francisco. There is more than the Chinese and the Japanese community. And we're looking forward to helping to make San Francisco and Soma a more visible place for visitors as well as the residents that live here. So looking forward to working with your staff and looking forward to working with other city departments on this. We've already started meetings with the planning department, and we have working groups that are looking at all of the issues that we'll be working with the departments on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chan.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Sanjalka Kabande, and I'm with the Southern Market Community Action Network. SOMCAN was actually born out of the gentrification that was happening to the Filipino community in the 90s. And I'm here to express my support for the Soma Filipinas resolution. Though it took the city 8 years to move this forward, we feel this is a great first step of the city to partner with our community to not just remember our contribution, but ensures we continue to grow here and live here. We talk a lot about our history because we have a saying in the Filipino community: if you don't know history, you don't know self. If you don't know your history, you won't know where you're going. And we definitely know where we're going as a community. We want to stay here. We want to be not just remembered, but acknowledged. And we want our rich culture to continue in San Francisco. So we hope, aside from passing this resolution, through your leadership, the city continues to partner with us so we can protect and enhance the livelihood of our workers, families, seniors, youth, and everyone here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this important piece of legislation on item 4? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed at this time. Supervisor Kim, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
Just that I want to recognize that this entire Land Use Committee, as has been pointed out by members of the public, are co-sponsors to this legislation. So thank you so much for your support, and also want to thank Supervisors Mar, Avalos, Campos, and Yi, who do not sit on this committee, who are also supportive of this, of establishing the Soma Filipinas. I would just like to say that I really want to recognize the community in their efforts to put this together. It's actually not easy to put together a cultural heritage district. It's easy to slap a name on a street or in a neighborhood, but what we are endeavoring to actually do is much, much larger than that. Yes, we want to preserve the history. We want to recognize the tremendous achievements, but also the the work of Filipino and Filipino Americans in making San Francisco the city that it is beyond the Filipino community. But what we are trying to do is far beyond that. We are also trying to work to support the existing Filipino residential and small business and nonprofit community in continuing to stay here in the South of Market. And that is going to be a heavy lift. And so I'm looking forward to working with this working group and the planning department, along with a variety of other departments in the city, to ensure that we are really creating something different and new in terms of what becoming a social cultural district will be. And following on the footsteps of the Filipino social cultural district is the Leather LGBT social cultural district that had also been identified as part of the Western Soma plan. And so there's a lot of work ahead of us, and it is it will be difficult and challenging, but I know together that we can do this work together. And I just want to thank the community for putting a lot of effort and time into making this a reality and really kickstarting this process after close to 8 years of us being in discussions about what this would look like. So committee members, I want to thank and acknowledge you for your support, and I'd love if the committee would pass this out with a motion with recommendation to the full board.
All right, I see Deputy City Attorney John Givner.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, I will step back then.
Thank you, City Attorney. I had a number of amendments to submit today that clarifies but also adds some of the data points and really important history. And I do encourage everyone to read this resolution. It is very edifying in terms of the immense amount of history that Filipinos and Filipino Americans contributed. But I have distributed these amendments to the committee members and to our city attorney. Do I need to read them to the record? Because there's a lot of them.
If I may, I understand you distributed amendments that change a number of the whereas clauses
yes.
To reflect the history more fully and the contributors to that history.
It's the resolve clauses?
And the resolve clauses, I understand you're changing to so that the resolution no longer mandates the creation of a working group, but designates a department to prepare the strategic plan in consultation with a number of different community members and other city and county departments in the school district listed in the resolution?
Yes. So most of the whereas clauses, as you mentioned, do more fully state the history of the Filipino American community in the South of Market. We have some minor amendments to the resolve clauses, for example, ensuring that Soma Filipinas is a regional center of Filipino culture and commerce, and that we include the Entertainment Commission and Department of Rec and Parks, along with the other named agencies that were in the original resolution. But finally, that we are asking the Planning Department to convene the working group over the next 6 months to bring forward these recommendations to the full board.
Sorry, just one other question. The original resolution required the board to hold a hearing following the submission of the plan by the working group. And the clerk's office, I believe, has requested that either you just require the submission of the plan and leave it up to individual supervisors to call for a hearing, or otherwise amend the resolution to require the department to submit a new resolution so that the board can accept the plan.
My understanding is that amendment's already been made, because that language is not even before me today in the copy that I passed out to the board. It says that that the strategic plan shall be developed and presented, I see what you're saying, at a hearing at the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. So the request from the clerk's office, I'm sorry, is to
provide that the planning department shall submit the strategic plan to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So, and then the commission and any supervisor could call for a hearing to actually ensure that it's heard in public. Or you could require that the planning department submit a resolution to the Board of Supervisors, which would ensure that the Board of Supervisors holds a hearing regarding the plan.
I'm not worried about the Board of Supervisors having the hearing. We will certainly have it. So I'm comfortable with changing the language that the Planning Department shall submit this report to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Supervisor Kim?
Yeah.
Is that it? Are we?
So
would you like to make a motion?
That's my
Or
amendment.
one of my
that I'm-
colleagues. Okay, so my colleague, Supervisor Peskin, has made a motion to move this forward with a positive recommendation.
The amendments first, as I articulated, including the additional one that City Attorney Givner has just advised us to take on.
Thank you very much. So why don't we make it simple, and we make a motion to approve with as amended, and then move it to the board with a positive recommendation, and we have unanimous support for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, it's time time to call item number 5.
Item number 5 is an ordinance amending the general plan revising downtown area plan map 5 affecting portions of the Transbay redevelopment plan blocks 1 and 2.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Can I say something? Madam Clerk, I want to just reiterate that I can't push my button to signal that I want to talk, and Supervisor Peskin can't either, and I would really appreciate it if that could be fixed, because it's a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to go through old school communication. First, we'll recognize Supervisor Peskin, then we'll recognize Supervisor Wiener. We have item 5 before us. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please clear the chamber quickly and quietly? Okay, thank you. I believe we have a staff presentation from OCII here. Before we hear your presentation, we're going to hear from Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisor Wiener. I would like to address an issue that is not directly on point relative to this item number 5, but is deeply troubling to me. And without casting any aspersions on staff, I cannot help but note that on February 25th, the Planning Commission considered 2 general plan amendments. One is before us today. The other general plan amendment, not related to this at all, had to do with the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program. What I find to be extremely troubling is the fact that Planning Department staff, for whatever reason, has chosen to forward one general plan amendment and sit on the other. And I have theories about why this is, but if the Commission acts to recommend a general plan amendment or a piece of legislation, I expect that department staff forward those to the Board of Supervisors for calendaring and our deliberations and consideration. The fact that the department is choosing to selectively forward actions that the Commission has deliberated, to me, is extremely political. And I, for one, am not going to vote for this particular issue today until or unless the department forwards this other issue. And Mr. Switzky, I'm not pointing fingers at you, but the reality is it is not up to department staff to set this elected body's calendar. And the fact of the matter is the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program was introduced last year as compared to this legislation that was only introduced earlier this year. And the fact that the department is selectively forwarding legislation to this body. And by the way, I note that as to the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program, and I don't want to get the city attorney nervous about me not speaking about something that's not on the calendar, this board extended your department and commission's time to consider it. That extension expired yesterday, April the 3rd. Technically, I would set forth that has now become a negative recommendation. You can't sit on legislation or general plan amendments and give them to us whenever you want. So with that, I am not prepared to vote on this. I would like to make a motion subject to public comment to continue this to the call of the chair. And when you start bringing us all the other things that your commission approves in a timely fashion, we can calendar those things. These two items are completely separate pieces of public policy, but the policy that I'm looking for is a policy where you guys forward legislation that your commission has reviewed, deliberated, and made recommendations on.
Thank you, thank you, Supervisor Weiner.
Supervisor Peskin.
Okay.
Supervisor Peskin, thank you. Supervisor Weiner, is there remarks that you'd like to make?
We look remarkally
I
similar,
know,
especially our height, but we are different people.
The two Jewish guys.
I'm just curious to know if the planning department has a response to that.
That's a good question. I am interested in the
And
planning
I know I don't
department,
want to put Mr. Switzky on the. I know you don't speak for the entire department on all matters, but I would just be curious to know the response.
Supervisor Joshua Switzky with Planning Department staff. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to comment on that. I haven't been directly involved in the deliberations on that program or the legislation that is related to it. I can certainly take your concerns and comments back to the senior management of the Planning Department and find out the story behind the differences in the timing.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may, through the chair to Supervisor Peskin, I'm just wondering, so it sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, what you're saying is you don't want to vote on this item unless and until the Planning Department forwards everything that's made its way through the Planning Commission. And my question is, first of all, how many items fall in that category? And I do think that all members of the committee, of course, should be voting on the merits of items that are before us. And so I just, I'm concerned if we have a member who doesn't want to vote on items, any and all items forwarded by the commission, if there are other items that Planning Department staff has not formally transmitted. And so I'm just wondering if you could clarify your position.
Yeah, here's my position. I'm only aware of this one other general plan amendment that I previously referenced, but I think the larger policy issue before this committee and before the entire Board of Supervisors is that the Planning Department is setting our calendar by forwarding whatever they want to forward whenever they want to forward it. And what I am saying is this is a perfect opportunity for this Land Use Committee to say to the department, look, when your commission acts within a reasonable amount of time, which means like a couple of days, the department staff forwards the commission's recommendations, and then the chair of this committee can choose to calendar or not calendar, as is the chairwoman's prerogative. But what I'm saying is I would like to send a message, and this is the best way to send it, that you can't pick and choose. We do the politics. We do policy and politics. You guys do the policy. When you do the policy, don't play games with the politics. We'll set our own calendar.
Okay. Well, Supervisor Tang and I think the mayor are the sponsors of the Affordable Housing Bonus program, not the Planning Department. So we don't calendar items until sponsors request them.
No, we can't calendar it.
Right.
No, I understand what you're saying. It is physically not in our possession.
When?
Supervisor Weiner.
So, Madam Chair, do we know when that came out of the Planning Commission?
February 25th, the same exact day, 5 weeks ago, as the general plan amendment that is before us today.
And so your question is, why is one before us and not the other?
Well, that ultimately, right now, you could not, as the chairwoman of this land use committee, schedule the general plan amendment on the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program because staff has refused to send it to this body. They've refused for 5 weeks to transmit it. And I'm saying when they transmit general plan amendments in a uniform fashion, this is the first time that I'm having to, in the 15 years that I've been kicking around here, contemplate introducing and asking you colleagues to pass a law requiring the department to forward us general plan amendments within a reasonable amount of time of when the Planning Commission has taken action.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
All right, good afternoon. We are calling this Land Use and Transportation Committee from recess back into session. We are on item number 5. We are going to take a moment and give the Deputy City Attorney an opportunity to speak on the questions that Supervisor Peskin raised prior to the recess.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner. I can speak just on the motion itself, which was to continue to the call of the chair. If the committee continues this item to the call of the chair, the clerk's office will have to reissue the required special notice for this general plan amendment. If you continue it to a date certain, then the clerk will not have to renotice the item.
Okay.
So that's one factor for the committee to consider if you plan to continue the item. The second factor to consider is that this general plan amendment is tied up with the redevelopment plan amendment, which has already been noticed for the full board on April 12th. If you continue the general plan amendment beyond next Monday, then and the general plan amendment does not get to the board by April 12th, then we will recommend that the board continue that item on April 12th.
Thank you. Supervisor Weiner has a question.
Yeah. Excuse me. I noticed that Supervisor Kim is no longer here, and
Correct.
this is her district, and so obviously her feedback. I know she's not technically the sponsor of the general plan amendment, but I know she has talked a lot about the 160 Folsom project and how it's 40% affordable, even though we know that it's the taxpayers who are actually paying for half of that 40% affordability. So this is an important discussion overall, and so I think it's important for Supervisor Kim to be here. I would be open to a one-week continuance on this, and it could be reported out as a committee report next Monday. I don't want to interfere with the Transbay plan, but I want to be very, very clear. I am not taking the position that we should bottle Planning Commission items up until the density bonus item is formally referred to the board. I am not tying unrelated items to the affordable housing density bonus, and I'm saying that because I don't want the planning department to walk away. I have no idea what Supervisor Cohen's position is. My position is that this item we should have the district supervisor here to discuss the various issues on this item, but I am not linking this to the density bonus.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what Deputy City Attorney Givner said is that in order to comply with the general plan noticing requirements, if we continue this to a date certain, given the 10-day noticing requirement, we would have to continue it to the 19th.
No, Deputy City Attorney shaking his head no.
So we could continue this 1 week?
That's right. Continuing to the call of the chair will require renoticing, but just continuing it to a date certain will not require renoticing.
Then I would make a motion to continue this item 1 week.
Would you like to take public comment on this item?
Sure.
Let's do that. We're going to, sorry, OCII, probably going to skip your presentation. And go ahead and move to public comment, as this was a publicly noticed meeting and people have taken their time out to come and comment on this item. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item? Come on up. Come on.
Francisco Housing Action Coalition, speaking on behalf of our 300 and more business organization individual members. When our members reviewed this project maybe about a year and a half ago, and we saw this tower and our architects were struck by its urban form, and we learned that it was 35% on-site affordable for a single private development, that was unheard of at the time. And now we've achieved 40%, between 80 and 120% AMI, which also happen to be within the AMI levels of the proposed charter amendment that's coming before you in June. And I think when you look at a project like this and you're looking in a general plan amendment and a rezoning, we're asking, what is the value capture? What do we get with an extra 100 feet? And with this project, we get an extra 73 homes, which we would make the case is a benefit to the city in and of itself. But 60% of those 73 homes are permanently affordable to middle-class residents, teachers and firefighters, postal clerks and whatnot. And that is tremendous and I think a clear benefit to the whole city, especially in a time where our conversation around housing is how do we get more housing, create more housing choices for people, and have private development contribute more to permanently affordable housing. So from that angle, from the priorities that the city has set forth and from the discussions that have taken place in this chamber over the inclusionary charter amendment, this seems like a project you would absolutely want to support and move forward. By slowing it down, we're delaying the production of almost 400 homes with 40% that are permanently affordable middle-class residents. And I don't think that really helps anyone. So we look forward to seeing this come, hopefully before you next week, and hopefully we can move it forward. And thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Carlos Duran, and I'm a field representative with the Carpenters Union, representing Carpenters Local 22 here in San Francisco. Thank you for your time and allowing me to speak in favor of this general plan amendment. I represent approximately 31,000 carpenters, of which over 3,000 belong to Carpenters Local 22. Carpenters Local 22 fully supports this general plan amendment for the following reasons. First, the amendment will raise the height restriction from 300 feet to 400 feet, which allows for more stories, which lead to more units of housing, including BMR units. This will address the housing crisis that this great city is currently plagued by. Second, Tishman Spires has committed to using a union general contractor. This means the additional stories will prolong good jobs that pay living wages, health and pension benefits, not only for current union members, but also it will create real opportunity for local San Francisco residents to enter the Carpenter's Apprenticeship Program that can build a career for a lifetime that will continue after this exciting project is complete. Tishman has been a great partner to Carpenters, and we look forward to continuing to work together on this and future projects. In conclusion, we are asking the committee to support this general plan amendment and push this project forward because local San Francisco carpenters are anxious to go to work, swing their hammers, and continue to build San Francisco. Approving this amendment creates real opportunities to local San Francisco residents, carpenters, and future carpenters to work and live in this great city by the bay. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Robert Devlin. I'm a sales associate at 1400 Mission. I'm helping 167 families get affordable housing in San Francisco, and I'd like to help more, and I do support this amendment. I'd also like to read a letter from one of the homeowners at 1400 Mission. San Francisco is a great city. It's forward-thinking, diverse, artistic, techie, walkable, beautiful. Now please make more of it. I was one of the lucky winners to move into 1400 Mission, the below market rate building on 10th and Mission. I will be moving there in a couple of weeks after the final paperwork gets approved. I implore you to improve Tishman Spires' proposed development of the height increase for Block 1. This will add 235 market rate condos plus 156 BMR condos like the one I just purchased, to a city that badly needs more housing. While I haven't moved in yet, I have already met many of my neighbors, all of whom are equally enthusiastic about finally getting to own property in the city we love. They are teachers, nonprofit workers, retail salespeople, writers, and more. They represent diverse cultures, ages, identities, and backgrounds. They are the people who make San Francisco so special, and it's exciting that we will soon all abandon our 1 hour plus commute from other parts of the Bay Area and be residents of San Francisco. By finally being able to afford housing in San Francisco, then the East Bay, I can cut down on my commute time to work while having more time to do the things I love. Volunteering at the Walt Disney Family Museum, where I put on events for high school art students, and volunteering as a teacher at the YMCA, which relies on volunteers so it can fund after-school programs at the Tenderloin Community School. Density is great. It allows us to save energy.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Peter Hartman, a longtime South of Market homeowner and chairman of the Trans-Bay Citizens Advisory Committee. At our meeting in January, the CAC voted to support the general plan amendment and the increase in heights at 160 Folsom Street. Doing so, the CAC noted that the increase in heights adds a total of 73 more units, 60% of which, or 44, are going to be permanently affordable below market rate units. The effect on shadows on Rincon Park by the taller building is de minimis. The higher building height very much fits in with the surrounding neighborhood. There are many taller buildings from 400 to 500 feet and above on nearby blocks. When the original Transbay redevelopment plan was developed in 2004, the area consisted primarily of vacant parcels. At that time, even a 300-foot height seemed bold for the site. With subsequent development, what seemed bold then seems modest now. The additional unit strengthens the transit-oriented character of the project, and finally, the additional height enhances the elegant design from Gang Studios that we have. I and the CAC urge you to support the general plan amendment and the increase in heights. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Lauren Post. I'm Vice Chair of the Transbay Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm also President of the Greater Rincon Hill Community Benefit District, the city's newest CBD. But I'm here today speaking as a resident of the Transbay neighborhood in support of the general plan change. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see the staff's presentation today. You'll see it next week, but I just want to give you a heads up on some very key points in what you'll find to be a very comprehensive and thorough report from OCII and planning staff. The project is going to be 40% affordable, which is astounding and very good for our neighborhood. We hope to bring more families into the Transbay neighborhood, not have it just be a bunch of tall luxury high-rises. 40% affordability in the Folsom Street project will do a lot for the diversity and enjoyment, quality of life of this neighborhood. Another feature you'll see of this project that you'll hear about next week in the presentations is that the below market rate units will be spread throughout the project, not just concentrated in one area. That is not the norm in buildings throughout the city, mixed use buildings. It will be a new model for this project. Something else this project will be leading the way on that you'll probably be hearing about for future projects that you consider is that the developer is going to subsidize HOA dues for those below market rate units. At the CAC, we've struggled with how to reconcile that. How do you have families that can't afford expensive HOA dues living in a building and able to enjoy all of the amenities that building offers? What Tishman Speyer has done may very well serve as a model for other mixed-use projects throughout San Francisco. Please support this height increase. It will do a lot, not just for this neighborhood, but for the city as a whole. Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Jerry Dodson. I'm with Save Rincon Park, and I would like to appeal to the Board of Supervisors not to approve this 100-foot extension. The plan, the land there is zoned for 300 feet, and the plan reads as follows. Variations from this plan shall only be granted because of unique physical constraints or other extraordinary circumstances. No variation shall be given for the maximum height and bulk regulations. A 426-foot tower would be a negative impact on our beautiful waterfront, and I urge you not to do it. Also, the environmental impact report is 12 years old. This neighborhood's changed radically from industrial and warehouse use to residential, and so it's really out of date and should not be relied upon. Also, this would overwhelm the waterfront, having a 426-foot tower. It would be a very negative impact on our beautiful neighborhood, including shading two parks, increasing traffic, and making the wind blow even more than it does now. Also, the advertisement is there's 40% that the developer's making below market. This is not true. They're donating, the developer's receiving $19.2 million worth of property as appraised, and that's supposed to be, that would take care of, so there's really only 20%. However, that $19.2 million, that land is worth much more. The Board of Supervisors approved a lot that was about 4 blocks away at First and Folsom for $43 million. And this one is much nicer. 160 Folsom is much nicer, and so should be worth much more than that. So again, if taking that land into account, really developers not putting up any affordable housing at all. And it's really a gift that the city is making to the developer. So the financing is very poor at this. Finally, there's supposed to be an economic study that was never submitted called 33433, and that has never been presented.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers that'd like to speak on this item? All right, colleagues, are there any of you that'd like to speak? Okay, let me close public comment. Public comment is closed at this time, and I'd like to recognize Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you. I think before we decide whether we're continuing this, I really would like to know the position of the district supervisor on this, and if Supervisor Kim is not available, perhaps someone in her office could come in. I just think as a supervisor who represents the district, it would be good to know. Supervisor Peskin has suggested a continuance. I don't agree with the whole notion of tying this to the affordable housing density program. It's a separate issue. It has nothing to do with 160 Folsom. But I just am curious to know the position of the district supervisor on this issue.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. I too am interested. Just so you know, I've asked my staff to reach out to Supervisor Kim's office. She's left a message with Supervisor Kim's office, and it was understood that Supervisor Kim was not going to be staying for item number 10. She had a previous engagement. I don't know if April in her office is able to join us. We're still trying to figure that out. But in the meantime, I wanted to see if Supervisor Peskin had anything else that he wanted to add.
No, I have a motion on the floor to continue this item 1 week.
Okay. All right. So in the event of we haven't heard from Supervisor Kim, I think we could continue this item. We are in agreement to continue this item 1 week.
I mean, do we know if they're available to come down?
I have them on the phone right now.
Can we take a 5-minute
Sure, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
I have a meeting with the mayor right now.
Supervisor Kim is not going to join us. We're going to call this meeting out of recess. The next scheduled meeting, and that is April 11th. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. If there's any without objection, Supervisor Weiner.
This is a close call for me because, like I said, I do want to hear from the district supervisor, but I am concerned that supporting this motion could somehow be construed that I'm buying into the linkage to the affordable housing density program. So I'm not going to support the continuance. So.
Okay, Supervisor Weiner, that's fine. You've made it very clear that you were not tying the two. Let's do a roll call vote on this motion.
Supervisor Peskin? Peskin, aye. Supervisor Weiner?
No.
Weiner, no. And Chair Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. You have two ayes and 1 no.
All right, thank you very much. This item will be continued to 1 week, April 11th. Thank you. All right, are there any other items before this body?
There's no further business.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.